It's 5:03. I'm going to get started and just sort of walk through. My name is Brigitte Baga-Rubin. I took over Fuck Up Nights Washington, D.C. in November. And because it's COVID, that's the excuse I'm using today. It took me a little while to get things up and running. But what we are going to do is meet once a month. And we're going to sort of follow the purpose of what Fuck Up Nights is about, which is, hey, this is how we screw up professionally. This is how we manage to survive and share these ways that we've grown from it, and also how to avoid it, because I'm not really interested in repeating bad history. So each month we're going to have a different topic. You guys can see them on my meetup, but this one is money, because tax day was theoretically last week, but now it's in 3 weeks. So we'll start off with money being the root of all fuck ups. And then next month is let me think this and really fuck it up. Then winging it. And then didn't see that coming, fuck ups from underestimating the power of others. Now, my personal favorite, because I do it all the time, is the foot in the mouth fuck up. And we will be doing that in September. I will put them all out there for you guys if you want to speak on it. I can only have 3 or 4 speakers. We have a loaded thing today. I'm thrilled. Each session. So, get out there if you're interested in coming in. But one thing I ask everybody to think about is, hey, let's share our stories. Let's talk about it honestly, what happened. Let's share, how we survived and got out of it, but also looking back, how we could have avoided it or what we would have seen in our spidey senses get honed. So I'm going to hand this over to Laura, because Laura is the actual magic behind this, and she's my co-partner in crime. So why don't you go ahead, Laura?
Hey, good evening. And I am Laura, and I am a leadership coach and analytic mentor and instructor. So what I do is I help people, analysts specifically, but all sorts of people, slow down and think about how they think. That is kind of my mission in life. And my favorite one I'm looking forward to, which is going to make perfect sense, is overthinking it. So yeah, so I fall into that because I think a lot. So yeah, so that's me. Back to you, ma'am.
All right, let's get started since we only have so much time, and I've got a fabulous startup. So I told John Fuisz that he could start us off. He has an amazing background. I'd like to introduce himself, but he has gone all around the world and can talk about how he has been shaped by the money fuck ups that he's made. So without further ado, John, why don't you open the floor?
Thank you. I'm always happy to have the largest fuck up. So I'm John Fuisz. You may or not have heard the name, but you've probably heard of some of the companies that I've fucked up with. And that is Theranos. It was in the news about a year or 2 ago. It was one of the largest scams in Silicon Valley. Elizabeth Holmes, a billion-dollar company, one of the largest unicorns, on the cover of Vanity Fair, all these magazines. And it was kind of the go-to company. She had sued me twice. And as part of my absolute failures in understanding kind of in situational awareness, it cost me essentially my career, and was a $1 billion fuck up, which is why I'm where I am today, bouncing back in a different way. So let me talk to you about situational awareness and fuck ups. I was historically an intellectual property attorney. So we did patent litigation, patent licensing, and I should have known situational awareness, right? Because in the larger licensing deals, when we're dealing with Russia, when we're dealing with Chinese, dealing with Japanese, we would deal with kind of advanced techniques. So we would deal with neurolinguistic processing, right? Where you are using anchoring, you're using language to subliminally manipulate your opposing side, moving licensing negotiations. We would have honey traps out of the Chinese, where we would have people being recruited to be compromised before a hearing. So I grew up and I had a 25 career where I was keenly aware of kind of situational awareness and paying attention to the clues and what was going around me. One of the people I think that taught me that was actually it was Falk Sr., he was White House counsel for Ford. I needed his assistance. It had to do with Scud missiles back in '92. And I tried to get into a cab, and he wouldn't let me get into the taxi cab because he said any taxi cab waiting shouldn't be waiting. We should use a different one. And more or less alerted me to the fact that every little thing mattered. And it really carried through kind of 25 years of being an intellectual property attorney. So along comes Theranos. I'm sitting at home. I had been a partner at McDermott, Will & Emery, and I had left McDermott over a disagreement having to do with the Chinese government. Started my own firm, was having fun. Someone knocks on the door and I'm being sued with a complaint. And I had never heard of Theranos. I only marginally had heard of even Elizabeth Holmes by that point in time. And she had sued me for theft, for stealing her kind of crown jewels for this billion-dollar company, right? So it was a big putting me in the spotlight. I should have known. The complaint was wrong. It said I was the board of director of a company that didn't exist, right? And that should have been my first clue. That, you know, I saw that they said I was a board of director. I knew I wasn't. In my mind, this would have been an easy thing to fix, and we should have fixed it, and I should have been dismissed. But they amended the complaint and they didn't dismiss me, and that should have been a major clue. I should have paid attention in retrospect, that they weren't playing fair. We saw people outside the house tailing us. It was GPS fusion. David Boies was involved, and we were getting the full Weinstein treatment, where every aspect of our lives was being kind of picked apart to advance the Theranos agenda. And the Theranos agenda was essentially that somehow over a 2-week period, as a senior partner in a firm, I would have been going through trash cans looking for an extra paper copy of something that someone may have thrown out, and somehow stealing it and giving it to my father, who I was not talking to at the time. But regardless of what the facts were, the lawsuit continued, and I should have known that something wasn't right. I even went and started researching Theranos, realized they didn't have a product. I realized they were lying. They were lying when they were entering into agreements. I realized Boies was lying. I'm the one who uncovered that Holmes and Balwani were actually a couple, and started disclosing that information to the press. But I forgot to be situationally aware. I get dismissed from the case because Holmes lied. She said she didn't know I worked at McDermott, Will & Emery. I was on the website. It was an easy issue. They finally dismissed me from that case in the statute of limitations. She resues me and resues the firm in DC. The DC judge throws it out in the papers that it's the most ludicrous thing he had seen. But I'm still a witness. At that point in time, the case was going forward because I wouldn't stop going to the press. And I had my deposition taken. I was cocky. I had been through tons of depositions. I had routinely destroying experts in depositions. It was what I did for a living. I was the hired assassin, essentially. And I as a witness to a case, I was well aware of what answers they could use, what they couldn't use, what I could say and what I couldn't say. So if there was anything questionable that I was worried about being used against me, I would simply curse and add a little ad hominem at the end of the answer, knowing the judge won't allow it in. And that if it's a questionable issue anyway, add in the ad hominem, and then we need to cut up the thing. They're not going to be able to use it. I said fuck more than a few times that day. I accused the opposing counsel of engaging in bestiality. I've made several other accusations, and really kind of went after David Boies and his team at that point in time. Then my father, his attorney, a nice gentleman from George Washington University, decides he wants to do some additional questioning at the end of the case, and asked me if I was really improperly using some potty language at the end. So I will tell you what I said. So I was asked by the attorney. Now, mind you, this is after an entire day of questioning. My wife's in the hospital. There's medical issues, etc., and I'm just incensed that I'm still in this case. And I'm asked a question: do you think that what you've been through as a result of the allegations in this complaint may have affected to some extent the way in which you answered some questions in this deposition? Well, this was my father's attorney. I wanted to get out of there. There's an objection. Then I answer, absolutely. I am more than pissed off at these people. I intend to seek my revenge and sue the fuck out of them when this is over. And you can guarantee I will not let Elizabeth Holmes have another fucking company as long as she lives. I will use my ability to file patents and fuck with her till she dies. Absolutely. I was pissed. I should have known that David Boies was going to use that in his opening. But I didn't. Somehow I just totally forgot about that. So what happens when the case starts, even though I'm not even part of the case at that point in time, and there's absolutely no point to have me testify, that's his opening line. Well, that makes the news. And wouldn't you know it, law firms don't like that type of language, nor do judges. That was the end of a 25-year career because I got too cocky and I wasn't aware of my surroundings. I should have realized that I had someone coming after me who didn't care that I wasn't part of the company, who didn't care that they didn't have a product, who didn't care, the allegations were that if I got on the stand, they would be asking me questions about the sex life, who my current wife dated. And things like that had nothing to do with the case. I mean, full Harvey Weinstein type crap. And I should have known I was dealing with some pretty skeevy people, but I forgot. And that was the end. So the firm I was with decided that was it. They didn't need the attention. I had already left one big firm, started my own firm, came back to big law, which was unheard of. Leaving big law for the second time, there's going to be no return. So I ended my career that day with one mistake. Fortunately, the Russians played on our social media and I could figure out how to go hunt them. And I've started Verifex, and I am now in this startup world, slowly trying to take back over. But in terms of fuck ups, money, greed, situational awareness, that's my story. Happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
We can have people raise their hands individually. If you'll raise your hand and then on the thing where it says reactions, and then Laura will pull you out one at a time. I'll ask you a quick question.
Or no questions, it's okay. We can always move on to the next one.
So when you were sort of going through this with Theranos and rolling out all these different issues, did you find that, were you continuing to sort of build your own network of support, or were you sort of not paying attention to that, and do you think that undermined you in some way?
I was not, but not for lack of effort. I think what happens in the legal world is people, when they hear of innuendo, they run. Lawyers don't like controversy. The number of people, my friends who I would have expected to kind of rally around me, or at least be there to listen, to understand it was BS, realized it wasn't good for their career either to be associated with me. So from a legal standpoint, in terms of the community I built over the 25 years, they disappeared overnight. They disappeared before I was even sued, because they had heard about it. Theranos apparently had been threatening McDermott for 2 to 3 years that she would sue the firm if they did not fire me. She was kind of running her own offensive campaign against me. And as people would hear about that, they would simply distance themselves. Would it have been nice to have a crew to for support, sure, but it's not, when you're in, I think, any of those high profile things that they're hitting the newspaper, etc. People pay attention to headlines. They don't get behind the headlines. They don't care what the real story is. So if I needed to give a 2, 3, 4 minute explanation of, I'm not a board of directors, I have no association with that company, I have no ownership interest in that company, I've never heard of the company, they don't care. They've seen the story. And if you see, most stories will just say so-and-so accused of X, and that's where the stories end. They don't say cases were thrown out.
Right. Yeah, Adam Bricker said, John, in hindsight, do I assume correctly that your father's attorney's question was a setup?
Yeah. I mean, I think he had his own agenda. The Theranos case ultimately ends with, they don't want me to testify. I'm supposed to testify the same day that Elizabeth Holmes is supposed to testify. They don't want me to testify. I was the source for all the information that the Wall Street Journal used to expose her as a fraud. I mean, I was running my own offensive campaign against her then at that point in time, kind of info ops campaign. They don't want me to testify. David Boies offers me work on his cases to simply walk away and sign an NDA. I send his email to the press because why wouldn't you? It's only David Boies, who then sends me back an email that I think it's the famous line that's used in the book Bad Blood. It's the email that's, those who the gods destroy, they first make mad. That David let me know that he would be coming after me.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I
So,
could lose wars.
James Cagle brings up the point, how do we avoid getting caught up in the moment? It sounds like you, for all your professional skills, still got caught up in the moment. I mean, I do it to an extreme extent too, so I totally need this coaching.
Anger is one of the few emotions in your brain, and it makes sense, that doesn't actually get routed through the process of thinking on some level. It's a pure emotional reaction. So triggering someone into anger, you can bypass rational thought, which is great for offensive info ops, but it's also just, I should have forced myself to take a breath regardless of how I felt. And regardless of everything else I was thinking, I should have put in some form of procedure to protect myself. No different than I had lectured every single witness I'd ever defended. Breathe, wait 3 seconds, don't go with it. Just, pause. I should have done it. I knew to do it. I just didn't do it. I even screwed up.
Yeah, Paulina Moore brings up the point, given Elizabeth Holmes' notoriety now, could you not resurrect your career and might time heal a lot of this, or is that not the case you're finding?
In the legal world, it doesn't. The legal world, no one wants to scan, and it makes sense. Every other partner in a law firm doesn't want to have to explain a headline to their client. And it's just the headlines that are on the internet. And it's no different than any other scandal you read, whether it's political, whether it's business, whether it's a movie star accused of something. You don't care how it ends. You're just looking at the headline. And in that case, it was a very well-known woman with a very high-profile attorney that was on White House commissions, at the Obama White House, was on the cover of Vanity Fair's, billion-dollar backing from all of these famous people. Whose word are you going to believe? And then once people believe I'm a thief, that's it. I mean, and then from a law firm standpoint, no one wants to sit and hear a 10-minute explanation of why John won his cases.
Adam Bricker asked, did you leverage any OSINT specialists for your offensive campaign?
No, that was my doing. It's where Verifex comes from. I spent multiple years understanding how social media was being used and how I could use it offensively.
So that's what did come out of this, is that you basically sort of parlayed all that into your new business.
That became Verifex. That became my understanding of how social media was used to influence the population and hurt people's careers. At which point, when the Russian issue came up, I could understand how the Russian SVR system was working. I could then create an offensive system and I could move forward with Verifex. I mean, Verifex then is a direct result of the Theranos case.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks. I really appreciate you being so open with this. This is a huge thing, and it must have been really hard on you to go through so much for so long.
Still alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I was telling that to my child the other day. I said, it's 26.2 miles, but it's those 0.2 miles that just really kill you.
Yeah, make it.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
If you get a chance, John, if you're open to get LinkedIn's, if you'll share your LinkedIn profile online. I'm going to roll over to Brad now, and Brad's going to sort of talk about what happens when you try to teach people like me how to fly a plane. So go for it, Brad.
Wow, John, that was insane, dude. I didn't really mess up. In retrospect, actually, I don't have a mess up. Yeah, that was, wow, holy cow. My situation was much more smaller. I teach entrepreneurship and I teach negotiation up at Penn State, and I've been an entrepreneur over the years. But when I moved to this area, there was no flight school. I was a flight instructor, and I thought, hey, I'm going to start a flight school here. And I thought, well, I would like to do it the way I'm teaching entrepreneurship. And I thought I'd really like to see what I can do with very little. That's kind of like my big shtick in teaching entrepreneurship to students, is like, see if you can start something from scratch with what you have, with what you're not afraid to lose, without having to go and beg rich people for money, because that's what most of the entrepreneur ecosystem does these days. It teaches kids that the only way they can be successful as an entrepreneur is if they beg a rich person to give them money in the way of a pitch contest, the Shark Tank mentality. And, I often point at the Shark Tank gang and say, would you work for them? Would you really want to work for them? I mean, is that really what you do? Then just get a job, it's much easier. So one of my big favorites is turning trash to treasure. And I love the business model of the old barber shop business model, the beauty parlor one, where you have no employees. A beauty shop, the old ones had no employees, right? Like one person owned the place, and the chairs are rented. And so the beautician would come in, rent the chair, have their own customers. And I thought, wow, that'd be a great way to do this, basically tax-free, no payroll taxes, no infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. All you need is basically a steward, like one flight instructor, and specialist doctors set up the offices the same way. There's one doctor that's the specialist, that's the steward, who makes sure that if there's a secretary or the bills get paid, whatever, and then the rest of them come in and they rent their office. And I thought, well, I'm going to do the same thing with flight instructor. I'm going to find, other instructors to come and rent my plane. And I had this very laissez-faire attitude. Now, early on, I was very laissez-faire with the instructors getting their own students, and all they had to do was rent the plane from me, and in the price of the plane covers all the overhead.
Right off the left. Now you can't see anything around our area, but you do notice back to.
So anyway, long and short was here, how do you do a lot with a little? And over the course of 15 years, we've had over 1,000 pilots. I mean, we've done, a couple $100,000 worth of flight instructing with one crappy old plane and no employees, which I think is kind of cool. Bad news about all that is, thank you, FAA, and thank you, insurance companies. You may or may not know this, but the FAA has this rule called, it has to do with overhauls. Every so many hours, your airplane needs to have its engine taken out and be completely overhauled. It's a very insane rule, goes way back, way back, way back. Nobody wants to be the first pilot flying the plane that's just been overhauled, because technically that makes you a test pilot. Before the overhaul, everything works really well and the compressions are good and the engine is good. And then, hey, the FAA, we're here to, we're not happy until you're not. That's their motto. And so they show up and, hey, you got to do your overhaul. Okay, so I have this little airplane. Quick thing on aviation economics. If you get a bunch of junk and put it out on a sidewalk that's aviation stuff, it could be about, $100,000 worth of stuff. Okay. But if you put it in a pile and call it an airplane, now it's only worth $20,000. That's economics of aviation. That's how it works. So here you have this little junky plane that's really only worth $20,000, even though it has $100,000 worth of stuff in it. And ta-da, the number comes up, and the FAA rule, you got to get this sucker overhauled. Guess how much it costs to overhaul a $20,000 airplane's engine? $26,000. Yes, that's right. You put $26,000 in this machine that's only worth $20,000. Guess how much it's worth after you put the $26,000 in? $20,000. Of course, duh. Net present value. Anyway, my point is this. So my insurance, okay, now the insurance is a whole nother ball of wax. The insurance is going to insure your airplane for whatever it's listed at as its official price. There's one source, it's called VREF. VREF is this company of people that make up numbers. They assign them to airplanes. So my airplane is, the VREF value is $20,000. That means no matter what I put in it, I can never get more than that for the value of the plane. So in other words, I take $20,000 airplane, I got my insurance for $20,000, and that's it. It's only worth $20,000. I could put all this other stuff in it, and let's say I put a brand new GPS TV system in it that's a $50,000 machine. It's still only worth $20,000. If I hit it, it's only worth that much. Okay, so this is where my F up comes from. I didn't really I did the whole laissez-faire thing, and I'm like, they're instructors. They've been vetted by the FAA. I'm sure they'll know what they're doing. I'm sure they'll know what they're doing with their students. And I had this very, you have a very intimate relationship with your flight instructor, right? I mean, and when I say that, I mean, it's like, this is a person who is going to tell you that it's okay for you to get in an airplane by yourself for the first time and just go fly it, like, by yourself. So not only do you have to believe they know what they're talking about, you have to actually believe that they love you and actually give a crap about you. And you have to really love them back. Like, it's a very symbiotic thing, or it just falls apart. It's like, you're good to go, probably. Give it a shot. See, what's the worst that can happen? The wings fall off and you die. No biggie. So you have this really intimate relationship with each other, and you can't just like be asking each other for, crazy and the minutia. Anyway, I have a student. She's doing pretty well, and one of the things I require of the students is that they carry insurance to cover my deductible for my insurance. So, okay, so I've got my $20,000 airplane, and I've got my deductible on it, and it's $5,000 deductible. So I tell students, look, I cover the insurance. All you have to do is get the renter's insurance. That'll cover our deductible in the future, and you have to get it renewed every year. And rather than trust everybody, and this is early on, okay, I was just getting started, just getting a little revenue, just getting things moving. And I have a student who goes and has what's called a prop strike. Now, that sounds like a terrible thing. It's not a big deal. A plane comes into land and the nose is a little low, and blink, and the nose propeller hits the ground, and it immediately bends. Like, there's very little actual torque action that's going to happen to the engine or whatever. But again, thank you for the FAA. We're not happy until you're not. If you get one of those, mandatory, you have to have a teardown of the engine. Guess how much a teardown of the engine costs? $20,000. What? That's like the magic number. Everything's $20,000 for a crappy little plane. Anyway, long and short, she has a prop strike. Calls me up and, hey, Cheryl, how's it going? Oh, I had a prop strike. That pushed me off the runway. Oh, okay. Tell me, she tells me, are you okay? You safe? Everything's good? Yeah, I'm fine. Okay, good. So as it turns out, Cheryl had accidentally forgot to tell me that she had let her insurance lapse. So this was a bad situation, right? Because now she tells me, and I'm just starting out, I just have the one plane, I've got a bunch of students, but just one plane, not much cash saved up. And she tells me, yeah, okay. So the insurance company says, okay, you have to do, FAA says you have to do a mandatory teardown. It's going to be $20,000. Oh, and by the way, there's a deductible. Oh, and by the way, she forgot to pay her insurance, so you have to pay the deductible. And interesting thing, if you get the teardown, it doesn't count towards, even though it's 3/4 of an overhaul, it doesn't count towards the overhaul. So I'm still going to have, so I'll pay $20,000 for this thing, and then in maybe 1,000 hours, I'll have to pay another $26,000 for another overhaul. That's crazy. So you upgrade it, right? So in one fell swoop, I went from feeling pretty good. The insurance guy comes out and says, okay, well, look, here's what we'll do. We look at your plane, 20,000, and if it costs more than 3/4 of the value of the plane for us to fix it, we'll total the plane. So we'll give you a check, but then you have no more plane. It's like, I'm just getting started. I just got a plane. It's hard to find these kinds of planes. So he looks at it, he says, okay, we'll pay $11,250. That's the most we can give you. And less the $5,000 deductible, we'll give you. Okay. So in other words, I just got hit with basically a $30,000 bill out of nowhere because my student had a little prop strike. And so again, it's nothing compared to what John went through. And I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this story, but it did happen. It was definitely an F up, and I did learn from it. And what I learned from it is that the FAA is always there to help. And you have to stay, even though you can be laissez-faire, there's some things you have to stay on top of. And that's basically what I learned from it is, and we never had a problem with this again, is I always, make sure that I'd have to standardize a little bit. And I guess that's the moral of the story is like, if you want to go Uber on something, which is basically what we're doing, there is some degree of standardization that has to be done, and it's your responsibility to do it. And I guess that's what I learned. So it has never happened again. And Cheryl is a pilot now. And as I said, we've had over 1,000. I was just telling Mark, we have a couple C-17 pilots out there. We have our very first astronaut, very exciting. We have a number of commercial pilots that are out there. And I've actually just in the last year retired from doing pre-private students. And now I just do flipping the airplane upside down the safe stuff, and much more fun. So that's what I got for you.
Wow. So you didn't actually weren't in the plane during this happening at all, though. But and she was injured.
She soloed. She was soloing. Okay. Right, exactly. And I supervised the solo. She would call me up and say, "Hey, I'm going to solo today. Okay, let's look at the weather. No winds. Okay, not raining. Good. You can see Mount Nittany. All right, sounds good. Go for it." And I didn't have to stand there and watch her do it. But she made a boo-boo. She wasn't thinking. Boo-boos happen. But wow, that was an expensive boo-boo.
It was, and it makes me think like we talk about the age of flying cars, right? Because I'm, I went to Penn State to get my degree in innovation, and let's talk about, hey, next thing we have is flying is planes. So is this the same kind of approach that we're going to have when it comes to a flying car accident? Total tear down every single time you run your bumper into a tree. So I think unintentional consequences of bad policy, right? But
well, that's what happens when you get the government takes over every aspect of. I mean, if you want to see what an industry looks like when a government takes a hold of it and strangles it from its inception, take a look at aviation. In 1918, the government took over because they didn't want scary people flying around throwing bombs out. And since then, if you look at the innovation that's occurred in aviation over 100 years, it sucks. I mean, it's embarrassing. I mean, the amount of flying cars, I think that's fiction. I think you'll never see that. I think you'll see Peter Pan come out of the grave and be alive again before we see that happen. In my view, unless that thing is so regulated that the most you can fly is 3 inches at a time.
Wow. So more like a hoverboard, right?
Maybe. I mean, look, the FARs, the Federal Aviation Regulations, were about that big. They were about that thick when I started flying 15 years ago. They're that thick right now. You can't actually do all the rules in the FARs without breaking rules. Mm-hmm. So good luck. I quit flying when they start having flying cars.
Harvey, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, quick question. I just saw a piece, Facebook, my primary news source, but apparently what happened was there were 2 persons in a Tesla.
And they caught on fire and burned to the ground?
Yeah.
And they had to call Tesla to figure out how to put it out?
Well, there was evidence that there was no one in the driver's seat. There was someone in the front passenger seat and someone in the rear. And it hit a tree, and they were both immolated.
Yeah.
Incinerated.
Yep.
And so what you're talking about, apropos to the discussion on flying cars, I think autonomous vehicles are just a different version of that, and that they, under normal circumstances, wouldn't leave the ground. But I think it's rife with problem, which will probably be overregulated and not contribute much.
Well, there's a reason you can't fly drones in any populated area, because they have batteries on them that if they catch on fire, there's no fluid on Earth that can actually extinguish them.
Exactly. I mean, a simple thing, I mailed something for repair. It happened to be a wristwatch. So that I had to answer a list of questions about like this with the postal clerk about what was and was not in the package, because it'll probably fly because it's first class mail to Washington State. And certainly lithium-ion batteries is on the list. I mean, it's quite interesting.
It is. And it was funny. I remember when I first started out here working in DC, and I worked under this amazing person at DARPA by the name of Michael Goldblatt, who's since moved on to a couple of other organizations. And Mike would say, we are governed by a set of laws, in many cases, like our telecom laws, that were made in 1945, and then surprised when they don't work for us. But because we haven't changed that, you then get Uber and Lyft and Airbnb. They're saying like, you know what? They don't apply to us. So see what happens. And so now we're seeing things fought out in different ways across the board. And it's going to be very interesting to see as these different materials emerge, as different things come out and say, well, we don't have a policy for that. We don't have a law for that. What's going to happen besides, I don't know, 5 million people doing a class action suit? How is that going to affect you if you're an entrepreneur in this space? Are you going to get your butt sued? Possibly. Or maybe you're able to absorb it like the Pinto cost and move on. I don't know. So yeah, somebody said, famous 9 words you never want to hear. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I work for some people that are amazing, and I love them, but they will be the first ones to say, like, we are our own worst enemies in many ways. And it's unfortunate because every single person I know in the government, all they want to do is serve the mission and do the right thing. But we've got a lot of pain in the way of that. So I really appreciate Brad, and you're totally correct. I think we need to overhaul FAA, just one of the systems, but that's maybe I'll do like a 12th session on I'm from the government and here to help session, and we can talk more about the FAA.
Well, I'm a volunteer for the FAA. They a long time ago, 2006, they started a new program to try to get rid of inspectors and replace them with local flight instructors. And I've been volunteering for the FAA since 2006 to keep them from having to get more people and more rules. I volunteer it's volunteer time. I go all over the place to do seminars and all kinds of crap to try to help out. So yeah, people can help make government a little bit smaller, maybe make rules a little less. I don't know, but that I guess is something I learned as well. But I'll shut up now. But thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Well, our next person up is another CEO, Richard Boyd, and I should say that everybody on this thing has an amazing number of titles. I'm just not including them all in there, but I'm going to let Richard take off from here, and he can start introduce his largest fuck up.
All right. Oh, the largest one? Well, that's a whole different topic, I think.
And he is good.
Yeah, my name is Richard Boyd. I'm a serial entrepreneur and recovering aerospace executive, and I've fucked up a lot over the last 30 years. Isn't this where you say, hello, Richard, and welcome me and make sure this is a safe space? I don't know how this works really, but yeah. So my background is a little bit different, working in movie industry and in computer gaming and in aerospace, as I mentioned, now working in artificial intelligence and machine learning. But I'm going to take you back very quickly to the 90s, since you said tonight the topic is money. But I think of all the topics you talked about for the next year, I could have stories around every one of those topics. But I'm going to tell you a little story about money and the strings that accompany it always, right? And also a story about expertise and just letting experts be experts. I don't want to give it all away yet, but there was in the late 90s, and that sort of those halcyon days when money was flowing freely, we were forming game companies pretty quickly. So we did game companies with author Tom Clancy. One called Red Storm Entertainment. We did one with Michael Crichton. We did one with science fiction writer Douglas Adams, who did Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And we did one with Ozzy Osbourne. That's its own session of fuck ups right there, just that iRock company. But so the difference between our big success with Red Storm Entertainment, if you guys are familiar with that, one of the most successful game franchises ever, probably, making realistic tactical shooter games. We came up with this really great model at what was called Virtus Entertainment, where we would put in this technology. We had this game engine. We just called it Open Space, but back in the 90s, you had to build your own game engine first. And we did a model where we owned half the company, Clancy owned half, and then we had Pearson throw about $25 million into the thing. And Tom was great because he said, hey, you guys are the game experts. I don't know anything about games, but I'm writing this book called Rainbow Six. And we were actually building the game at the same time as he was writing the book, right? So some of our guys who worked on the game are actually characters in the book. But what was great about him is he said, look, I don't know anything about making games. You guys do the game stuff. I'll put you in touch with the FBI hostage rescue team. And we actually put some of our programmers, with tattoos and piercings and stuff into live fire exercises to learn things like pieing the corner with your weapon and checking your six and all that sort of stuff, and translated that into a really successful game when everybody said, hey, you're crazy. No one's going to want to play a realistic tactical shooter game where one shot kills. And that, in fact, was the tagline. But now we know it is one of the most successful game franchises out there. Now, following on the success of that, we started talking to everybody from Stephen King to Margaret Weiss to Orson Scott Card to, like I said, the other people that we mentioned. Ended up inking a deal with Michael Crichton. The first game we did was around his book Timeline. Same thing. He's writing the book while we're actually building the game. But because we've already been successful with the Clancy franchise, which is still running today, of course, and does $1 billion a year, or more in revenue, we got a bigger chunk of money. So Eidos put money in, but there was one difference in that deal, and that's where the strings come, right? In that one, Michael Crichton said, "Oh, just this little thing. I just want one little thing. I want complete creative control." And we probably should have said, with situational awareness, like John said, "What do you know about making computer games, Michael?" But again, if you ever knew anything about Michael, again, he's 6'10", brilliant guy. He did ER, he did Jurassic Park, all that stuff. But he's like, no, I have a lot of ideas, and this is what I want to have creative control. So we had this great budget. We hired like Ron Cobb, the guy who designed the spaceship in Aliens, to be the artistic director. We had this symphony composer doing the music. We actually released a CD of just the music in the game. We made the cover of Computer Graphics World with some of the graphics and the multiplayer engine we built for it. And we were just about to release. And if you guys know anything about computer gaming, Christmas is big. So we'd already spent 2 years building this game. We'd spent $30 million, which was big at that time, building this game, and it was already getting rave reviews. So we went to, some of the big game conferences and stuff, and showed what we had, and people were just buzzing about it. They couldn't wait to play it. But Michael was, coming along behind, like checking all the graphics, and he wanted a little like educational bit that teaches about 14th century France. If you remember the book and the game, and then it was a movie, right? It was about scientists going back in time to 14th century France and learning really how nasty, brutish, and short life could be in 14th century France. There was a lot of knights riding up with a sword and lopping off people's heads. It was pretty gory and pretty difficult environment. But what happened was that summer, right as we were getting ready to release the game for Christmas, and everything was coming together and it was looking beautiful, somebody broke into Michael Crichton's home in Los Angeles and tied him and his 14-year-old daughter up, and while they ransacked the home. And it's not even clear that they knew exactly whose home they'd broken into, but they tied him up. And Michael was a very spiritual guy. And again, if you've ever read any of his sort of side pieces where he could bend spoons with his mind, the first time I met him, he started telling me about my aura. He believed in afterlife, spiritual things, all sorts of really interesting ideas buzzing around in that, in that brilliant mind. But right after this event of being held hostage, he flies here to North Carolina, comes in, sits us all down. And I was working on a separate company at the time, but I came in to listen because Michael Crichton's here, right? And he starts talking about what had happened. And he goes, "Look, I've had this epiphany." And the epiphany is there's too much violence in video games. Even though Timeline is the whole thing, and the movie, if you saw it, was lopping off heads, a lot of violence, a lot of death. And in the game, we have these siege, castle siege scenes. And of course, one of the most dramatic things that can happen to you in real life, or in the movies as you're watching it, or certainly in a game, is sort of getting killed, right? And that was a big part of the game mechanic that we had in this game. But he said, I've had an epiphany. I want us to take all the killing out of the game. And we're all sitting around looking at each other. And finally, I'm like, Mr. Crichton, won't that, remove a lot of the dramatic tension in the gameplay if you can't die? And he just goes on this rant, like, nobody trusted me when, nobody believed me when I came up with the idea for ER. Nobody trusted me when I came up with this idea, that idea. I want us to make a game that my 14-year-old daughter will play that just is beautiful and is educational. And we're like, Mr. Crichton, well, I'm just going to throw this out here, but what if, just bear with me, what if 14-year-old girls don't buy medieval fighting games? Let's just say that happens, right? And again, he goes on another rant, but because he had that creative control, and we were all going like, look, we make games for a living. We understand it was just a nightmare to spend $30 million in 2 years of your life working on a game and have him come in and said, hey, I had a dream, or I had an epiphany. We're going to take it all out. And sure enough, if you go read the reviews of the Timeline game, they're like, what happened? We saw the previews of it. We saw it at the Game Developers Conference. And now we start playing it, and you can play the whole game in like 3 hours because you never die. You fight the big battles, and everyone just sort of gives up, right? And it was just horrible. It was a horrible experience to live through and watch and see this beautiful game that everyone poured their heart into, that all this money and expertise went into, but you had someone who said, no, I have the final say. And despite your expertise and all of your objections, we're going to do something completely different at the last minute. And it just scuttled the whole thing. So that's the lesson, is when you take money, and I still do that today, I don't just take money from anyone. I want to make sure if it's an investor in a company I'm doing, or when Lockheed Martin bought my last company, it was about how aligned are our values. And what am I going to do? Like when you buy my company, there's things I don't want to do, but hey, space travel, renewable energy, healthcare simulation, I'm in. But don't put me in charge of missiles or anything else. It's not that I know we need those things. We got to blow stuff up sometimes, but that's not what I want to do. I want to make sure our missions, our values are aligned, and I can continue to do what I want to do in the context of your company and with the money you have. But that's an important lesson, is when you take money, make sure your values are aligned, your goals are aligned, and of course, check the fine print and all the strings that are attached. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. That's one of the 50 fuck up stories I can tell you. Any questions?
That's amazing. Brad, you're on mute. I was going to say, this ought to go right into Brad's class on negotiation and influence, because this is an exact case story like he would have given us. So Brad, you look.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to chat with you at some point. That's really amazing.
Yeah, I didn't even get into liquidation preferences and all, because we did sell Red Storm Entertainment to Ubisoft. And I'd done my calculation for what my check was going to be. But I didn't know that there were meetings apparently that I wasn't part of that had like liquidation preferences and things like that. So it wasn't just like, oh, I think I have 1.2% of this, $80 million check. No, there were some zeros missing on the check I got because I didn't read the fine print.
The big print giveth and the small print taketh away. Right?
Exactly.
What was the one that you did for Douglas Adams? Was that the Starship one?
Yeah, Starship Titanic. We did a lot.
Actually
that was
played
so much fun. I miss that guy a lot. And again, I don't know if you were paying attention or keeping score, but I mentioned Tom Clancy, Michael Crichton, Douglas Adams, and Ozzy Osbourne. Only one of those people is still alive. I don't know what conclusions you can draw from that. I know it keeps me up at night sometimes, but
hasn't he had genome, like he was even curious about why he's still alive. He has genome looked at.
Him and Keith Richards, right?
Yeah. How
so we did this natural language bit for Starship Titanic where you could actually talk to the characters in the game and they would speak back to you. It was called Spooky Talk. That was, and again, we're talking 1996 or so. So that's another story.
I played that game several times. I remember the Spooky Talk. I actually have a Mac that will actually run on in my basement.
Fantastic.
I may have to go dig that out tonight. That was a great game, and Douglas Adams.
Yeah, nod to Richard Harris, and I can't remember all the other guys who worked on that with us, but a lot of fun. Never a dull moment in the 90s. Not that it's dull now.
That's a great point. So do you now have a trusted lawyer that does all this for you? And
a team of them, yes. Nothing gets done without everything being read and gone over completely. Because you like I said, it's about alignment. And of course you can legislate things to death, but it really comes down to make sure that you can look across the table also at the people and realize that you are aligned in mission, values, everything, because it is a kind of a marriage, right? When you take money from somebody, it's not just like, oh, thanks for the money, and now we're going to go do whatever we feel like doing. There's always strings attached.
Right.
pay
And
attention to them.
Mark List says there's an interesting trend in the stories that focuses on situational awareness. And well, Mark, I sort of put that there, I planted that in leading to this moments. Do you think avoiding these events is more about surrounding yourself with the right people or attention to detail on your own?
I think probably both, but and like I said, the list of lessons learned accrues over time until I feel, and that's why I spend some amount of my time, advising young entrepreneurs, like at the Adams Apprentice program at UNC Chapel Hill and elsewhere, because it's like being a parent, where you can see the mistakes your children are about to make, and you can tell them and as much as you want, and they're still going to make them, but it's so painful to watch when you know exactly what's about to happen. And all you can do is go tell them. And I feel like Cassandra sometimes when I tell people or my kids, they don't believe me. And then the thing happens and I just have to sit there and they have to come in and say, oh yeah, you were right. I'm like, well, that doesn't make me feel better or you feel better because together we were not able to avoid that problem. But hopefully through venues like this, we will help some people, even if it's just one person, avoid that kind of mistake in the future.
Yeah. Or at least to share, like one of the things I always joke about is in government contracting, you find those government lawyers, the government contracting officers who always find a way to get to you to yes. And like you said, hey, you need to talk to this person. Or like I'm going to call up my father-in-law right now, Harvey, because if I ever have a FAR question, he knows it up, down, and backwards. I can say, hey, Harvey, what does the FAR say about this and how far can I stretch it? So
let's all have Harvey on speed dial.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would interject that the federal acquisition regulation is probably this thick, and it was written by a committee that never met, and it is self-conflicting in more ways than you'd ever want to count.
That's true. We've actually looked at applying machine learning to deconflict compliance rules.
Ah, good luck.
I mean, that's the only hope, honestly.
Yeah,
I think.
But what used to happen, in addition to the fact that the regulation was so bad anyway, inherently, when you'd get your annual procurement audit, the auditors were working by memorandum. They would get a memorandum from the section chief, and essentially it was this year's hit list. In other words, it was almost like the story about a traffic cop is sent out on his tour of duty with a full ticket book. And if he comes back with a full ticket book, he must not have done anything. So he's chastised for that. So you got to write tickets. So they needed to find fault, even if they had to make it up. And there was no debating it, nor any court where you could have it tried. You just had to take it.
That's horrible.
So
So
owning land in Italy.
yeah,
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, so if you try and reduce it to AI, okay, you might get a cleaner body of work to work from, but leaving that human element in, such as it is now and has been for, I guess, since the beginning, it's, I don't know if it works. I mean, as somebody, Brad mentioned with the FAA with the rules being like this. I mean, we used to have, as a joke, it wasn't really a joke, but it was a copy of the contract from the US Army to the Wright brothers for the first military airplane. It was a single page, 8.5 by 11. I don't think you can buy any. I mean, the aircraft obviously become more complicated, but it didn't have a whole lot to say.
right. So we're running out short on time, and Laura just reminded me that we've got Mark still left here, and Mark's going to tell us, like, when all else fails, you're just going to have to chew on some glass. So with no further intro, I'll let you go from here.
Okay. Great. And I'll probably go a few minutes after 5. If you need to run, feel free. And then I'm free to stick around too if there's Q&A after.
Thanks.
All right. You guys see my slides? Great. So I am a Air Force C-17 pilot by trade and an Arabic speaking Middle East specialist. And my F-up story starts about 5-6 years ago when I was doing research in Turkey on the Syrian civil war. This picture came out while I was in Turkey. This was a rare food delivery in a besieged suburb of Damascus called Yarmouk. The government in Syria was starving out entire cities to break their will. And children were being shot by snipers, foraging for weeds to feed their families. Imams were issuing fatwas, allowing people to eat cats and dogs. And people asked me when I was talking to Syrian refugees in Turkey, why doesn't the Air Force do something? Why can't you just airdrop stuff? And one of the answers is you just can't fly big cargo planes into the middle of war zones without getting shot down unless you destroy the whole air defense system, which isn't something the US wanted to do at the time. And that wasn't good enough for me as someone who was a pilot, who spoke Arabic, knew the region, and also grew up writing software and building robots. And I started thinking, how in the 21st century can you get something into besieged areas? And long story short, over the next 2 years, I built a nonprofit corporation called Uplift Aeronautics, not to be confused with a different company now by that name, trying to build a paradigm for swarming airlift, using large numbers of small drones to swarm relief into besieged areas. If you can't get a big cargo plane through air defenses, maybe you get a lot of little ones through, each carrying a few pounds. So you can picture an army of ants moving a picnic lunch. I saw this as a military technology, but there was no way I was going to execute a moonshot like this through the military. So we incorporated as a nonprofit. I was beginning a PhD at Stanford at the time, so I had access to tremendous talent. I was off the reservation. This was very, very painstaking work because it was not profit-driven. I was starting in my garage. I was ordering radio control planes and autopilots and trying to recruit volunteers wherever I could find them. Huge learning curve, crashes, dangerous situations. I thought I was going to jail, trying to get the technology to work. It was very emerging technology. Extraordinary political and legal challenges, as you might imagine, that we were trying to work through. But we were getting there. I had read all the books on entrepreneurship. I dreamed about doing it. I had my Stephen Pressfield and my Bold and all those other books and knew about big, hairy, audacious goals and, really set out on a moonshot. We got to the point we could deliver a kilogram at 100-kilometer range, which was enough to reach Aleppo from Turkey. And this all culminated in a climatic event where I'm friends with the owner of an Arab refugee center in Sacramento, and we had a bunch of families come out, Arab, Iraqi, and Syrian refugees, and we taught them how to operate this paradigm to deliver aid. We had women making parachutes out of garbage bags. We had children decorating boxes with messages of hope and healing, showing that we could actually do this. This was a paradigm that could not just deliver some aid, but maybe have political effects of sending a message of hope and healing, almost like the Berlin airlift. This event was phenomenal. It was one of the best days of my entire life. It came off beautifully. But there was a dark side to this, which was that I was badly burning out, and so was the rest of my team. We had been working as volunteers. We had almost no resources. We were fighting for every inch of progress. We were all full-time students at Stanford, not exactly easy programs. I had thought I was managing my own stress well enough day to day. I mean, like many high achievers and ambitious people, we think we can just power through. But we were all really racking up the toll over the months in ways I didn't even realize. And after that Sacramento event, BBC had filmed a story and it was coming out soon. So we knew we had one chance to ride that publicity wave. And our next milestone we were aiming for was to take that Sacramento demonstration and replicate it in Turkey, a friendly country. If we could do it in Turkey, everything would be in place. It'd be in the Middle East. We could try and then prove we got the ability to do this and work with the government to try and get one drone across the border. My moonshot was to get one package under the roof of a Syrian hospital. If we could do that, we could validate the concept and have something to build on. So we needed to get to Turkey and we needed money. So as I was breaking down, as our team was running on empty, we ran a crowdfunding campaign. So money was not the root of all evil here, but it was definitely a compounding factor that I was so unsure if we should be raising money for something I didn't know if we could pull off. And all the conventional wisdom is be bold at these moments, be audacious. And, so we did what we thought we should do. And I was so stressed, I couldn't even look at the crowdfunding page. I had delegated it down. And then this happened, July 3rd, as all of our options are closing and not able to get to the region. We've got crowdfunded money, about $40,000 in our account. Doesn't sound like much talking to a room full of entrepreneurs, but you're running a shoestring nonprofit, it's a lot. We crashed a drone at Stanford and it caught fire and we burned down 3 acres of Stanford in a dry lake bed. Barely got the fire contained in the lake bed. Had it escaped, it would have devastated a large part of Silicon Valley. This pretty much set me on a personal breakdown. And I'll just share a few lessons here. And, you know, I could talk about the lessons of money and whatever. And I actually think a lot of those things are so context dependent. It's really hard to know right answers. But the lessons that really set me on were about the personal journey through this. So one of my lessons was failure, number one, it's not just about a missed success. And we use the word like, oh, I didn't achieve something, I failed. There's another meaning of failure, which is being taken past the limit of strength. You think about like material failure, you bend something until it snaps. I think oftentimes when we experience failure in our lives, it's taking us past the limits of our personal capacities until our souls fracture. And that's what happened to me. And it really started to affect every part of my life at that point. Second thing I learned is it's not a one-time event. When we talk about maybe the recovery process from failure, what I learned is that failure itself can be a process, because I was still in the captain's seat with money in the bank and a team that was breaking down and all kinds of commitments strung out. So, you know, we just heard about, you know, you take money, it comes with commitments. We had sort of made pledges and promises to various stakeholders about what we could do. And I had about a 5-month journey still in the leadership seat after this day. As I was struggling with my PhD, I'd burned a lot of bridges. I'd made enormous career sacrifices to pursue this. I had people in the Air Force who supported, people who were very upset that I was not focused. And then my involvement in this project came to an end when I got a letter from my faculty at Stanford saying, you're not going to graduate if you don't knock this off. So I resigned, and at that point the game was up. The rest of the board kind of realized that, you know, this was done. So we dissolved. I would like to report that that started an immediate process of going off to do the next thing. Instead, what it really set me on was about a 2-year process in the wilderness of just processing through what had just happened to me and our team and the failure. And this is something I'm really passionate about, which is why I, you know, offered to speak tonight, because we don't talk about it. Even when we talk about failure, it's kind of easy to focus on the externals. The inner journey is taboo and it's hard. Some things I learned here, we often have a tendency to rush right back into the arena and do the next thing. It's part of just being an ambitious person. I think one of the things I learned is if we start that process too soon, it sets us up to fail again, particularly if you keep in mind that idea of, you know, being kind of taken past the limits of your strength. I tried to jump back in several times doing different things and would go well for a little while. Then some little thing would just set me off in a way that was way disproportionate. And I'd realize like, I've still got some stuff to work through here. And I think learning the stages of the process from the beginning of a failure season, how you navigate all the different feelings and experiences and how you start putting yourself back together, rebuilding strength, how you know, we heard from John, you know, your relationships get reshuffled as certain people leave, other people come alongside. That's a process. I think the more we can kind of educate people about this and know to expect it, we need to, because not everyone experiences a failure like this, but some do. And I kind of seek out and find entrepreneurs who've been through this and kind of collect those stories, because our entrepreneurial culture today really sets a lot of founders up for a hard fall. We start pumping money and resources into young companies and founders, sell them a dream of being a unicorn. And at some point, your company or your effort takes on a momentum in life of its own, where it's really hard to pump the brakes. And then if things do start to come apart, you know, who warned you about this? So the positive news here is I think all of us face these seasons in life in one way or another, whether it's professional, personal, divorce, death, or, you know, who knows? But I do think these are the times that we grow the most. I spent several years really processing this and found, you know, this was the hardest season of my life to date, but the most fruitful in terms of learning and growing. And my advice when I talk to entrepreneurs is, we could talk about tips and tricks, and those things are important, but spend some time really seeking wisdom, you know, like allocate some time to pursuing, you know, it's easy to run from this inner journey and not look at it. We want to just kind of move on and focus on externals, but just allocate some time to really learning these lessons. So if you'll indulge me that, well, actually another happy ending, I guess, to the story is I did go on to found another effort. I found and led a counter UAS and UAS drone software development team in government at the Defense Innovation Unit, leveraging my experiences. So I find it cheesy to say I failed my way to success. What I've found is it's always an oscillation. It's up and down. My involvement here came to a rough end, that it's a story for another day. But I was able to take those lessons and lead better here, make better decisions, really prioritize the health of myself and my team. I turned down significant money a couple times to stay sustainable. So these things do make us wiser. And the last thing I'll share is one of my ways of processing my experience was to write. I love to write. I spent a lot of time trying to give names to the feelings I was experiencing. And as Brigitte mentioned, I wrote a book, which I just released recently. The book I wish I had when I was going through this. These are some of the chapter headings. So you can kind of see that the milestones: failing, aftermath, healing, renewal. So if any of that catches your interest, that's out there. And I'm really just passionate about finding those people that need that message and connecting. So if I can be of help with that, let me know. And thanks for the opportunity to share.
Wow, thanks so much, Mark. I did share a link to your book as well on Amazon, at least. And I think this is a beautiful segue into closing out this segment of our first session. Since Mark sort of shared that, today is the anniversary of my sister's death. She died today in 2015. And like you said, with sort of the burnout, what you get, and how you get through each thing. I read something very interesting that said, what part of me is going to live on in you? And I think everything we do, there's parts that can be like pulled in that are burning and killing us. And then there's things that we go forward and help us grow. And it is hard sometimes to let go of the former and to let the latter, give life. So those are going to be my only takeaways. This is phenomenal. You guys just blew me away, and I've got so many wonderful chat sessions in here, and I really appreciate all your time and patience you have had going through this. So you'll see other sessions that are coming up. And what we're going to do is we'll figure out, we'll work with each of the speakers to see, what kind of portions we want to put on there. We'll also have some key takeaways from everybody's talks as we sort of grow this out. And, I don't want to take everybody's time up. Does anybody else have any questions they want to roll up with as we sort of close out this session? How about volunteers for the next session? So if you want to, you can talk to me afterwards. It can be the next session, a session after that. We've got, I've got them booked all the way into January, February. So if you don't have one that picks your eye now, hit me up. I've got a whole lot of topics, everything from like apology not accepted to, I didn't expect that. I underestimated that person and they really screwed me over. So we've got a whole gambit of things that we can do, and let's get involved. But also, I think just like Graham Plaster did, let's connect with each other. If you know a really good lawyer like Richard Boyd does, or a really good IP person like John does, let's connect up and make this even more of a learning session. So, anything else?
Thank you, Brigitte. This is amazing. And thank you, Laura, for making this all happen. This was seriously awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Laura and I have a lot of work to do, but also if you are not already in the meetup, join the meetup as well. I will try to do what I can for LinkedIn and grow out the LinkedIn group. This is my first social media platform, so you're gonna give me some grace. But we're going to continue to grow this out, and I hope each one of you will, come back, but also tell other people, hey, you should try this out. So
See you next time.
All right, Laura, let's stay on board, but everybody else, we'll see you in a month.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Yes, thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right, thanks very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Harvey. I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you, John. Oh, Harvey, Mary, you're going to come talk to Harvey?
Hey, Grandpa.
Oh, hi. Why are we injecting personal stuff into this?
Because I have to, because we are.
It's life. I was gonna say, you saw my cat, probably. Yeah, this happens.
Cats do that.
Yeah. Well, and I did call him out as somebody like, if you know a contracting person that knows everything about everything, you should have Harvey in.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what cats used to be attracted to before the keyboard was invented.
I know, right? It's so she's been locked out all day, so I had the door open. I was like, all right, this is supposed to be a happy hour. I don't have liquor, so I can have the cat.
Yeah, that sounds
Next month I need to have the liquor. This was heavy stuff. It was good, but it was heavy stuff.
Yeah, I think I was really impressed with we had a really good arc. I think that worked out well. I had talked to everybody ahead of time about what their story was going to be, with the exception of Richard. Richard said, hey, I want to talk, but he didn't say what he wanted to talk about. So Mark had contacted me about 2 months ago. And I'm really happy to add that in, because it did add that special emotional pull into this entire thing. So
but I would recommend no more than 2.
Yeah, going forward.
No 3, because we didn't get to hear from any participants, really. So, but it was a great, it was a great kickoff. That's what I was thinking, was this is a great way to kick it off and kind of set the tone.
Right. Especially like somebody like John Fuisz, where, he made all the national news, right?
Right, exactly. It was great. Yeah.
What do you think, Harvey? Because you're sort of, you joined in the middle of the group, but not as somebody who's like running through hard into the fire.
Well, I don't have the depth of experience, with the issue, that somebody that the speakers had.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur, attorney, and that type of thing. So my original intent in any event, when you first let me know about this, was I really wanted to listen, even if I never got to participate. But there were some things that piqued my interest and, raised a question. One that comes to mind now was when Mark was done and before you spoke, when he was talking about decompressing from failure, sounded like going through the 7 stages of grief.
Yeah.
And you must hit every single one of them if you're going to recover.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you mentioned the anniversary of your sister's passing, that came to mind.
Yeah. And I think especially like Mark, we can do a whole section on, especially people that are type A like me, who don't even stop to either enjoy what you've just won or look back at things that didn't go right, because we're just like, now I've got to take the next hill.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Right.
And it does wear you out and burn you out. So yeah, I think that was really, I like that. I liked sort of that we can say like, what do we see situationally that we may have ignored, and then sort of the fallout things, and then we can roll them out to a couple of talking points going forward. So.
Yeah.
All right, I'm off.
All right, I'll talk to you.
Nice to meet you.
Would you tell Scott to take a look at his, where did I send it to him?
I got it.
Was it a text message?
He said he got it.
I haven't had a chance to respond yet.
No, that's okay. Not a problem.
He got
Just backtracking.
Yeah, he got dinner duty today.
Yeah, I'm making dinner and letting Brigitte run her thing, and I'll appear. See, I appear, and then I don't.
You're a good lad. All right, I'm gonna duck out.
All right, take care.
Thanks,
All
Dad.
right, really good. Okay, bye-bye. Nice meeting you, Laura.
You too, Harvey.
All right, so Laura, what do we need to do next? We have a few things that we need to hit.
Well, because now we're doing this monthly, right?
Yeah. So,
Okay, so
see here, my next session is the one that was scheduled, is going to be overthinking.
okay. So before, you're already doing your type A thing, and I just wanted to give you some feedback that you were a great facilitator. You did a nice job. You kept them on time, pretty much.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
You made it impossible with 4, so you did a Herculean job keeping them focused. So that was good.
Excellent, thanks.
So all right, now moving into the whatever. So I'm pretty sure I made this a recurring link, Zoom link.
Mhm.
So you can use the same one, but I guess we need to include the meeting ID and the password.
right in there.
I don't even know if I shared with you. Oh, you can pull it off. But so it'll be the same one for every meeting. So
Okay.
that way if I'm out of pocket, you have it.
Right.
And then I guess thinking about overthinking. Do you have people in mind yet for that?
So let's see here. I had a person that reached out to me about it, and I don't remember. I'll have to check my emails. I already have some speakers that I had thought that had that natural propensity to overthink. You know, I'm gonna have to go through and look at some of them and ask them about it. Let's see here. Who are the big ones that I would hit up? I think. Did you know Rob Johnston when he was at the agency doing the lesson?
No, but we use his stuff.
Okay, so I had reached out to him about this, and he was actually, I think he had an interest in the overthinking one.
Mm-hmm.
So he's down in a university in North Carolina or something like that. So I was thinking about him. I was thinking about maybe even my this sounds weird, but my Krav Maga instructor, because she's a really good speaker. She's also got a psychology background, about overthinking and how as a small business owner, but also just in general, sort of.
So that's nice. If you've got the critical thinking dude, analyst guy, and then you've got a small business entrepreneur, which a lot of the business names look like they were smaller businesses. So that was good.
There's a probably, yeah, I have to think about who else we would. I've got a few other names on here that I would probably hit up.
Okay, but I don't think you need more than two because, slow down. Backups, if they say no, you can go to. Right.
Yeah, I'll hit those two up first and say like 10 minutes and we'll probably should follow the fuck up night session, which is 10 minutes. I'm going to give them 10 minutes and 7 pictures or something like that, whatever. But, and then we can have a wider spectrum of talking about the key things around this. So
right. Give folks a chance to speak up, and that's similar to something I had happen, or this is what I take from it. Right. So yeah, because there's a lot of knowledge in the room, I think. So and I don't know how many times people are going to come if they don't get to speak up. So we'll see.
Yeah. But sometimes also I notice, like in the one in Graham Plaster's group, and his group has been around for a long time. There's only like 3 or 4 that speak up regularly, and there'll be 60 people on the call.
Really?
Yeah. So it's very interesting. People take a little while to find their voice. Some people only prefer to be on chat, and their chat's like crazy, like goes all the way through, like super crazy. But it's just people getting uncomfortable, getting past their into their comfort zone. From what I've seen.
Right.
So
right. Yeah. So if we create the space, though, I think they'll fill it. So.
I think so. And they start getting something out of it, like, hey, you know what, this is really fun, or this is very interesting, and things I hadn't considered, when I was doing that. But one of the biggest things that I always joke about is that we can start breaking down some of those perceptions that, well, I only screw up once, or I only did this. I do like the fact that, like what John Fuisz said, was I did the opposite of what I tell every single one of my clients to do. I didn't take a break. I didn't
practice what I preach. Exactly.
Right. And I knew better, and I just couldn't help myself. There's the Ron White has the famous skit. He goes, I had the right to remain silent, but I didn't have the ability.
Absolutely.
So, so I'm going to put together some notes that I think we can hit on for follow-up topics from this one. Maybe that we put out as little seeds in LinkedIn over a period of the next 3 weeks to get people interested and ready for the next one.
Right.
And then we'll see how it goes as we continue to build this community. So
sounds good.
And I think this works well. I think it was I don't want to say, I think, I think people were engaged.
Yeah.
And that's all I ask for. I think that's my biggest fear, is people are going to sit there and go, I'm off. I don't care. I don't want to be there. I love like what Richard had to say, like around like the Michael Crichton thing. Those are huge names, right?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, those types of things where you're just like, wow, that went that went badly quick, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I think people sort of assume sometimes like, oh, I got the big names in the world. Well, guess what? They got bigger lawyers than yours. And
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Oh my gosh.
so yeah, that gets ugly quick. But this was, I'm happy how it went. I feel good. How do you feel?
Oh, good, good. I think we're tweaking well, and I think that it's going to come along. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we sort of create the content to go from here, and I'm going to be a good little student of leadership, and take a break. I'm going to go change my clothes, relax a little bit, and then sort of start to process this through. Karen Vianney, one of my friends from MITRE, who's in the tech transition group, said, I can't make it. I'm really sick. And I said, okay, we recorded it. So I'd love to hear what she has to say, because this is a big thing with her too, and see what key things she wants to bring from it. The other thing I was going to tell you is I got a really interesting thing from another group that said, hey, you know what? I really want to be here, but I can't. And so we're getting a lot more traction, and our group has grown a lot too. I don't know if you saw that.
No. I just keep getting the emails that so-and-so's RSVP'd, and it's nice. Yeah.
So I think we started off at like, it was fun. At first I was sort of sad when I took over leadership, and then I started putting stuff out, and like one person dropped, and then I thought like 20 people added to the meetup. So, so that's good. You know, we can start sort of defining that, but also defining who, as we go forward in Space to Fail, is going to be part of it. So I think Mark is a really good person to have in that room.
Well, and the other question to consider is, what do we value? Is it quality or is it quantity? Because I can't, first of all, we can't have over 50 people on my Zoom.
No, right.
We have to find another venue if it goes over that. And then the other part of that is, do we want that? Because do you lose the conversation? Do only 3 or 4 people participate?
Right.
So,
and we get the same opinions then too. But
right.
Yeah, and that's, I don't want to become that self-licking ice cream cone where we're sort of also saying the same mantras over and over again.
Yeah.
And I want to hear more creative problem solving. It was interesting. My friend Denisa weighed in, and she didn't say anything. Usually she's very loquacious. But she spent like 20 years in doing different types of animal things, like animal vet tech, to even like running an exotic animal ranch down in Texas. And so she has like fascinating solutions that are like, you know, borderline like MacGyver meets zookeeper. And it's sort of interesting when you get those types of perspectives, you start seeing like the ways that you can look at solving problems differently. And Brad's the same type of person, right? So we have these kind of conversations. So that's good.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. So what do you have for dinner?
We put chicken tortilla soup in the crock pot. So
I love chicken tortilla soup. When do you add the tortilla strips?
Right before I eat it. I just crunch chips on top. We're real simple.
I always hate when people like put them toward like the middle and they're all soggy. You're like, really?
Yeah, no. We just, I mean, you could put it in like and put the soup on top. That's what like On the Border does. I just sprinkle them on top. So
and it's fine. I love it. And then I'll go like On the Board and they'll like they'll add avocado and all this. I was like, it used to be healthy or lower calorie, and then
exactly. Too funny.
So oh well, Scott's cooking, so I don't care what we're making. It's just I'm not cooking.
You're not cooking. I know, that was cool.
Yeah.
So we'll enjoy.
All right, take care. I'll talk to you later.
All right, my dear.
All right, bye.